This is the All Players Eat-N-Geek for, what is today? Thursday, August 23rd, 2012. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about building a RESTful web architecture with Express.js. Express.js is just a little something that I've been really kind of geeking out about lately. In particular, that and Node and just kind of what it brings to web development and what we can actually do with it. It's pretty exciting stuff, which is kind of why I wanted to share what I've learned so far with everyone. Which that kind of brings me to my next thing, which is a disclaimer, which is basically I'm a relative beginner with Express.js and Node.js. Everything that I'm going to be talking about today is just stuff that I've kind of learned over the past 4 days. I started kind of digging into what it was on Sunday of this week, and then have just been kind of geeking out about it pretty much every evening since. But because I do have a background with JavaScript, a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been easily soaked into my brain. So I feel like I can at least get you guys started, so you guys can maybe do some of your own exciting stuff with the technology. All right, so let me talk a little bit about what was my goal to even look into Express.js. So I would say probably for the past year I've been really interested in creating like object-oriented RESTful web architectures. And what I wanted to do was to build, so lately I've been looking into building object-oriented RESTful web architectures in PHP, but PHP kind of has its problems, especially when it comes to concurrency. So if you're trying to build a RESTful web architecture that is going to have to deal with many people on the server at the same time hitting the same endpoints, you have to think about how you are going to handle concurrency. And Node is extremely attractive with that regard. And in fact, I started looking at Node about, I would say probably about a year and a half. Actually, it was probably about 2 years ago when I started looking into it. And at that time, it was still premature enough to where I kind of didn't really know what I would use it for. I thought it was cool, just like everyone else, but I still hadn't really drank the Kool-Aid, as you would say, with what Node.js is and what it can bring. And that was until just very recently, in fact this weekend, I started to look into it again and found a web framework called Express.js, which is built on top of Node, that really abstracts a lot of the complexities out of Node, making it very easy for a web developer to build RESTful services. So that was my goal, and I feel like I accomplished that goal, and I'm going to share that with you guys today. So I kind of talked a little bit about why I wanted to investigate. So first of all, Node.js allows for high concurrency, and what that means is Node is completely non-blocking, which means that every single execution that it makes, whether it be a file I/O or any type of communication on the back end, it does it in a way to where it does it asynchronously. So asynchronous basically means instead of you sitting there telling the file server to write a file and you waiting for it to be done, you literally tell the file server to write a file and you hand it a callback and say, hey, call this whenever you're done writing the file. So that's the whole premise behind asynchronous programming, and Node.js really takes it to the next level, where it states that everything you do must be asynchronous. And so you should never block, you should never do anything that would block a process from running. And the reason is because you may have thousands of people hitting the server at the same time, and if any one of those processes blocks, then it's going to be a problem for all the other people. So everything you do should be non-blocking. Another reason why I find it extremely attractive is because it is written in JavaScript, and as a lot of you know, I have a great affinity towards JavaScript. I feel like it's a very elegant language, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the future, which kind of brings me to my next point, which is Node.js is hot. It's really cool, especially when you get into it, and I personally believe that this technology is the future, and since everything in the web is kind of moving towards this RESTful web architecture, and because Node.js does it so well, I really do believe that it is kind of where the future is going with regards to web services. So let's talk a little bit of, get a little bit of background on these technologies that I've kind of been digging into, and they kind of build on top of each other. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Node.js, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, which is just an amazing technology that makes working with Node extremely easy. And then there's something that's called Connect.js, which is a layer that's built on top of that, and then I'm going to get to Express.js. So let's go and look at some websites. The first one we're going to look at is the Node website, which anyone can go here. It's just nodejs.org. This kind of goes into a little bit of an overview over what Node is. I've kind of already talked a little bit about what Node is. I feel like enough to where you guys can go here and look at it yourself. But the one thing I do want to bring your attention to is just the API documentation, where it kind of goes into all of the packages that you can bring into your application and use. And as you can see, it's fairly complete. There's a lot. I mean, pretty much everything that you would need on the server side, you pretty much have within the what comes out of core Node. One thing I actually didn't mention is that the Node was actually built on top of the Chrome's JavaScript runtime. So if any of you guys have ever had a chance to look at that, I'd actually let me go back to Node Home. So if any of you guys have ever had a chance to look at the Chrome's JavaScript runtime, it's also called the V8 engine, which is basically it just compiles JavaScript into like a compile time runtime that makes JavaScript run extremely fast, and that's why Chrome is able to run JavaScript at at an incredibly fast rate, is because it quite literally compiles your JavaScript using the V8 engine. Okay. I'm really glad that the video didn't get that. Somebody just blew their nose. So, all right. So anyway, so the V8 engine, the V8 engine is definitely something that I want you guys to look into. Once you actually start getting into Node, you then will start learning about something that's called the NPM, which is the Node Package Manager. I really feel like this is kind of what took Node to the next level. In fact, I feel like the NPM is probably the one piece that was missing whenever I first started looking at it, and I said, well, I don't really think it's quite mature yet. I think the NPM has actually made it really amazing. So what NPM is, again, it's a Node Package Manager, and it allows you to pretty much install anything that anybody has ever contributed using just NPM install. In fact, whenever I was actually investigating how all of this works, I myself wanted to actually create a package just to kind of go through that whole process and say, you know what, I want to have a package on the NPM that anybody else can install. So I created an account, which I really recommend everybody create your profile on NPM, because you get your username once, and if anybody grabs your username, you can't get it. So go to NPM right now and create an account on here, even if you're not going to use it for right now. So, and I think you actually even do that within your terminal. So you can say npm add user, and of course you have to have npm installed, which I was actually surprised I already had it installed. So maybe Mac OS X Lion has it. Does anybody know the answer to that? Like pre-installed? Because I didn't really have to install it, it was just there. And what I did is I typed npm add user, and that tells me that you then provide your username, password, and you hit enter, and it just registers an account for you, just there within your terminal. I thought that was really cool. So now that I have an account, you'll see here's my account, which is kind of like equivalent to the Drupal.org profile. You can go to my profile, and this has all the projects that I've posted to the package manager. And with that, you can see all the packages that I've done, and I'll even show you guys the package that I wrote later on in this presentation. So npm is something that's really cool. In fact, we will use it, so you'll get to kind of see with the power that it does. It looks like it's kind of hanging a little bit, so I'm not going to be too concerned about that. The next thing I want to talk about is something that actually builds on top of Node, which is the Connect.js framework. Now, what Connect.js is it's basically a middleware layer for Node. And the actual online docs are not very good, which is kind of why whenever I was trying to first learn about Node and I was trying to first learn about Express, I didn't really understand what Connect does. And it wasn't only until very recently that I kind of made a click where Connect is really like a plugin framework. It allows you to build plugins, and everyone can use your plugin by using like this use function, and then you can provide certain things to that application whenever they say, hey, I want to use this plugin, I want to use this plugin. So it actually provides that framework. But what I've actually learned is the best place, and for some reason my connection is running really slow here, but the best place to actually look at it and learn about it, I've actually found, is if you go to the actual source code and you go to this proto.js, just read the comments in here. The comments in here are really good. In fact, everything about Connect.js revolves around this use function. And I think they explain it really well here. And really, it's kind of like a router. You provide a path within your server, and you can basically mount a plugin at that path. And so what you're really doing here is you are mounting functionality at a certain location, which that was actually one of my requirements, is I wanted to be able to specify a path and mount a certain plugin at that location, and so that plugin actually activates at that path. So that is what Connect is used for, and which kind of brings me on to the next topic, which is Express.js. Now, Express.js is one level up on top of Connect, and it is basically a web application framework for Node. Really exciting what they're actually doing with this, and this is kind of what really Express.js is really kind of the wow moment for me with Node. It's really where when I started using Express, I was like, okay, this is something that is definitely usable. It's really cool, and I can actually build something on top of this. So the place that I actually got started was you just click on Guide here, and this really just walks you through how to actually build an application, which is kind of brings me to the next part of the presentation, which is something that we're going to spend the most time on, is we are actually going to build something. I'm going to walk you through how this works, how you can actually build an application using Express. So the very first thing that they do, I'm actually going to skip over this section here because where I actually jumped to was this right here, where you use npm to install Express globally. That's the first thing you must do. So you have to type npm install -g express. I had to type sudo to do that. But once you actually install it globally on your machine, you are then able to use the Express command line to actually make it build an app for you. So we're going to do that. This is going to be cool. And after I do that, I'll walk you through what this actually does. So I'm just going to type that, and this is going to be our test app. And so you can see it's already done, and it also tells you what to do here. So change directory test app, npm install, and then you can run the app there. So it just now installed it. But before we actually go in and install it, I want to kind of look at what it did first. So inside the test app directory, what it actually did is there's a couple of things that are really important here. The first thing that's extremely important for any package is it comes with this package.json. Now, this is a really important file, and this is where npm really shines as far as its power. If you want to build an application in Express, or even Node for that matter, all you really need is the package.json, which is very similar to, I think they said it was very similar to Sinatra, is the thing that they said that this was really kind of based off of. And it's JSON, so you basically provide a name for your application, you give it a version. Private basically means, do you want this to be shared with others? So like if you type npm publish, do you want this to actually go to the npm, which I'll show you how to do that, how to put your components out on npm so that other people can use it, which is really cool. The start is basically is how you want to start your application. I've actually never used this before. Another thing that you guys might see in these things is main, which is basically the main, so you could actually type app.js, which is the main entry point for your application. So this is another important one that I've noticed that a lot of them have, so that if anybody who is using your package locally, they could simply type npm install the name of your directory, and because you have a main, it will automatically build and pull in your code. So that's another thing that you guys might see. The big thing here is dependencies, and this is where the package manager really comes into play. So this right here depends on 3 packages, which is Express, EJS, which I'm not totally familiar with what EJS is, and then I think Stylus has something to do with CSS. To be honest with you, I haven't had time to really investigate that. So that's just probably something that I'll do later. But what I also want to do is just show you here. So I'm just going to do change directory to test app, and all I have to do is type npm install. What this does is this goes out to the npm, and it gets all the dependencies and installs them for me. And after that's done, what you'll notice is there's a new directory that shows up. And that directory, let me refresh my folder here. My computer's really struggling with all the things that I've got going on. If I refresh, you'll see that there's this new node modules directory. The node modules is where it basically places all your dependencies. And what's really cool about that is then you can actually use those dependencies within your app file. And you can use them by just saying require. So require Express, require whatever. So this actually built an app for us, which we're going to do by ourselves. We're going to create our own app. But I just kind of want to show you what this actually will do. So you can say, let's see, node, and then you just type node and app. That's all you have to type. And this will actually run on my local host at port 3000. So if I go to, wow, my computer is really going slow here. 3000. This will actually show the new Node application, which I'm not sure what is going on that's making my computer run so slow. It's probably because I'm doing so many different things at once. Monitor. If there's anything. No. I'll just see if I can get through it, and we'll just work with. Yeah, see, it's still typing for me, and I've stopped typing like 5 seconds ago. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is going to be hard. So anyway, as you can see, the Express basically it built like its own website, and so if we actually look at the code here, so let's look at the code, and we're going to see that what this is doing. So inside routes, the application is actually mounting this index file. And so this is what we can mount, and this right here, all it does is it renders the like an index template. So to be honest with you, I didn't really get much into this because I was more interested in not necessarily building a website, but building RESTful endpoints. But for those of you who kind of just want to play around with the HTML aspects, inside the views, you do have this index.ejs, which if we open that up, you will see that this is the HTML, and then it uses this templating system where it actually you provide the title and it just prints it. So what you end up with something like this. I thought that was pretty cool. But let's actually move on to not building our own application. So I'm just going to change directory out of there. I'm going to remove that totally. Test app. All right, so now I have a empty file or empty directory. So I'm going to clear out of here. So now what I want to do is I want to build my own application, just built solely on Express. So this is going to close out my files. And I hope you guys can realize how painfully slow my computer is right now. So what I'm going to do is go back to the guide. And in the guide, I'm going to go up to the very, very top here. And I'm just going to follow kind of what they do here. So I've already created a directory. The next thing I'm going to do is create that package file. So I'm going to just copy this, what they have in there. I'm going to go, and I'm going to say new, empty file. And I'm going to say package. Everyone's saying that my computer is slow because I'm recording. JSON. I guess I could stop recording if somebody else wants to pick it up. I'm going to say finish. All right, it's creating it very slowly, but it's doing it. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this stuff here. So this is just going to be a Hello World application, and my only dependency is Express. So now that I have a package.json, keep in mind that is all that I need here. So I'm just going to go back to my terminal, and I'm going to type npm. So as you can see, I'm going to do an ls here. I typed it like 5 seconds ago. There it is. So npm install. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to look at my package.json file, and it's going to bring in all my dependencies, which at this point is just Express.js. So I'm going to go back to NetBeans. And after I've done that, the next thing that all you really need at this point is you need that app file. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And what we're going to do is just create a very simple Hello World application. So where was I? Yeah, okay, so the next thing that we're going to need to do is create that app.js file. So once we actually finish that, at this point, because we installed the Express library, all we have to do is just bring it in. So Express equals require Express. So require is basically you saying, I want to use that library. The next thing that you do here is you just kind of read what they say here, which is just I've just required it, and the next thing we do is we say that we want to do app express. Okay, and then you use app get, and I want at the path of index, like the root, I want to call this function. And every function callback takes a request and a response argument. And then at that point, you just type response send and what you want to send back to them. It's really that easy. And then we're going to tell the app to listen to port 3000. That's it. That is a Hello World app in Express. We declare it. We want to get at the root, and we want to send Hello World. So let's actually run this thing and see what happens. So we call Node app. So now we're running. Let's see what happens whenever we go to port 3000. Hello World. There you go. So this is really cool, but this is also kind of not totally where I wanted to be. So at this point, I was getting really excited because I said, okay, this is really cool. I can define endpoints, and I can map callback functions to those endpoints. But what my goal was to create an object-oriented, basically, way to mount JavaScript objects to certain locations. Now, I haven't totally investigated this completely because I do believe that the connect that I showed you guys earlier may have a better way for me to do this. So I'm actually going to investigate on using that use function, but keep in mind I didn't really understand what that was doing until fairly recently. But let me just show you kind of what I did. What I actually worked on was creating my own little package, which was all it is a class. And what I wanted to do was go through the whole motions of setting up a package, getting it out on npm so that I could actually bring it in as a dependency. The very first thing that I did here is I created this package file. Now here's basically what my package file looks like. You give it a name, which my package name is resource.js. So if anybody out there types npm install resource.js, you will pull in my library, which I think that's just awesome. That now people anywhere can pull it in, and it'll just bring it into their libraries. Then you give it a description. You tell it a little bit about the author. You provide that main, which I only have a single the question, I wonder how they handle name clashes. You can't, I can't, it's all like how Drupal modules work. I cannot name my package the same as somebody else. So you just have to think of another name, which is kind of a namespace thing. So if you guys have an idea for a project you want to get out on Node, do it. Go get and reserve that name. I tried to actually get resource, but that was already taken. So I just called it resource.js. And so then you give it a version, and then you tell it what dependencies you have. So I used Express, and then I also used Mongo.js, which is the MongoDB backend. And then here's what's awesome. You can link that to your GitHub account, so which is actually this right here. So I'm saying the repository is Git, and here's the location of this repo. After that, I created a README file, and then I created this resource package. Now, let's take a look at what these resource packages look like. For the most part, the only thing that you really need to know is this exports pre-definition. Exports is basically like what you expose to the outside of your plugin. So if anybody wants to use your plugin, they're going to require it, and they're going to want to use it in some way. What I actually found out was whatever you return from the require, so let's say this right here, you see var express, require express. This require is returning something and assigning it to express. What I actually found out was all it's returning is whatever exports ended up being. And then I also had to use module exports as well. I had to reset what that is as well. I'm not totally sure why I had to do that, but I couldn't get it to work without that. So that still requires some more investigation. But what I do know is whatever you assign to exports, that is what gets returned here to the variable. So then I was thinking, okay, I have complete liberty here. I can assign whatever I want to this exports, and they can then use that outside of it. So what I did is I created a class. I created a JavaScript class so that what I end up doing is I return this express require. I return it. So let me just give you an example. So all I have to do here is type var resource equals require resource.js. And at this point, I now have a new class declaration called resource. So I could actually say var Travis equals new resource. And that would actually create a new object that uses my function here, which creates an object, which I've already gone over object-oriented JavaScript. But what's really cool about that is then I've got all of these functions, which is I've got my index for that. I've got save. I've got load, which actually set, get, load, save. So save actually saves it to MongoDB. Load actually will load it from MongoDB. But then I also baked in a lot of other stuff here. One of the things that I wanted to do was to create a mount function so that I could actually mount objects at certain locations. I'm going to say it again. I don't think this is correct. I think I can use connect to do this, to where I say use such and such at this path. So don't think that this is going to stick around, because I'm going to investigate how connect works and see if I can replace this mount function with what I want. But if you see what I'm doing here, I'm actually you pass in the resource object that you want, and I go ahead and do all this boilerplate code for you and do that mounting of all the. So if you get at that path index, that'll return the index. If you call add, that'll return the form. If you post at the path, it'll create a new object, as you see here, and it will call save on that object. So you're actually saving the object. You can get path and then the ID, which I use UUIDs. So as you can see here, I'm building out the whole REST endpoints for my resource. And so then, once I actually have this base class defined, all you have to do at that point to define new base classes is you have to just simply extend resource. Let me go into detail on how you do that. So just as an example, let us, in our app, I'm going to create a new user object, user.js. And one thing actually I haven't done yet is I haven't installed my dependency. As you can see, my Node modules only says Express. So what I actually have to do here is I have to say npm install resource.js. This is the one that I actually registered. So this is actually going out and it's reading my library. It just found all the dependencies, which is Mongo.js, and then all of that, and it installed it. So as you can see in my Node modules, what I have here is my package and then all of its dependencies. Because Express is already defined here, Mongo.js was also brought into it. Really cool stuff. So now that I have resource, this actually will define something. And so instead of actually me declaring a new resource, what I actually want to do here is I want to extend resource with a new object called user. So this user, I want to extend resource. So first I need to say var resource. And then I'm going to say require resource.js. And then at this point, it just becomes, I use the same pattern to define my class name. So whenever I would go through object-oriented JavaScript lessons before, you always name your function what you want your class name to be. Well, I found it a little bit more powerful that you can define what you want your class to be based on the variable you define that gets returned from including this file. So I'm going to use this exact same pattern here, and I'm going to say this equals function, and I'll show you what I mean here in a little bit. If I simply declare that, if I go back to my app and I say var user equals require user.js, hopefully you'll see what I mean whenever I said that. Here I'm actually defining what that object is called, what the class name is. I'm simply inside this object, all I'm doing here is defining, really what I'm defining is the structure of that object. I'm not defining what it's called. Excuse me, what it's called. So at this point I do the typical object-oriented JavaScript-y stuff, and I say that, because I'm deriving from resource, I need to say resource call, and then I say this, and then pass along all of these arguments. This is stuff that I've covered in a previous Eat-N-Geek. And then I'm going to derive from that. So I'm going to say exports prototype equals new resource, and then I'm going to say exports prototype. I'm going to have to reset the constructor. Constructor equals exports. So at this point, I now have a class that I can start defining my own stuff. Now here's what's cool about resource. All I have to do is define what my schema is for my new object. And so you'll see here, there's a schema that you basically have to derive from. Now, the base class, all it has is ID. So because I want to add first name, last name, and my username, I'm going to derive from that. And I'm going to say return resource merge. I had to create a merge function that uses the resource prototype schema. So I have to call my parent schema first, and I'm going to merge in my own data object, which is going to be first, which is a string, and last, which is a string, and maybe email. And that's it. All I've done is because I've derived from resource and I define this new user endpoint, I'm going to get all of those RESTful methods for me, and because I define my schema, it knows how to build that object. The only other thing that I have to do is I have to create a form. So I've already created it before, so what I'm going to do here is just copy and paste. In fact, what I'm just going to do is just check out that. So I'm going to say get checked out. And this is actually going to show you what the end result looks like. Yeah, cheater. I know, right? But anyway, this actually does some really cool stuff. But regardless, what this has done is this has showed you what that schema is. And then this field form, which I basically get the base class's field form, and then I pass in all the other stuff that I have here. So now let's talk a little bit about the app. How does the app work? So now once I actually have this user object, I actually created inside the resource this thing called mount. So you could actually mount that object in a path. You have to pass in the database collection. You have to pass in the app collection and path. This is all hacky. I know it is. I'm going to try to find a way around it. But until then, what I'm going to do is just say, let's see here. I'm probably going to need some help and find out what I'm missing. So I do need to bring in this Mongo.js object. So what I'm going to do is bring that in. So Mongo.js is another package that you can include, and that just brings in Mongo.js capabilities. I'm going to connect to my database, which is just this. So I'm just going to create my DB. Let's see how I've got this thing working. So yep, we're going to connect to the database. And then I've created my app. Okay, so then there's another thing called this body parser, which once you actually create the app. So here's the whole thing about this thing that I don't really quite understand yet, but I do believe what this is doing. Express body parser is able to translate different returns. So if you pass it JSON, it will return the correct data type to the people who made that request. So this is cool for like RESTful architecture. So all I have to do in my resource is pass an object, and it will translate that for you whenever it actually gets returned to the user's browser, which is pretty cool. And so then I've already required my Express resource.js. There's my resource. I created my user. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to mount it. Okay, so now that we have the user, we have the app, I'm going to call this function right here, which is resource mount. I pass in the app. I pass in the user's collection, and then I want to mount it at the user path, and I'm passing in this user object. And I'm going to get rid of this get there. And I do believe that's it. Yep, it looks like it is. Maybe I might add this in here. Okay. So let's actually just kind of, before I run this, let me just kind of walk through it just one more time on just kind of how this all comes together. So DB, Mongo connects. So I'm bringing in Express. I'm bringing in Mongo. Mongo.js connects. What that does is that's connecting to my local host and my test database. And I'm telling it to use the user's collection. So that anytime, so at that point, I could actually type DB users, and I would have access to the user's collection. And then it uses the same collection as, and also the same API that any Mongo API uses. So you can call find one on that. You can call all the Mongo APIs on it. At that point, I'm requiring and bringing in the resource. I need that so that I can use it down here. So I'm bringing in that. I'm bringing in this user object. So I'm just saying require user. I'm building my application. I'm telling the application to use the body parser for my JSON endpoints. And then I am mounting that resource at this location. And that's it. So if you were to use my class, this is all you have to do, and this is what it does. Here we go. Let's check it out. Good status. If this doesn't work, then I might do a git checkout, and I'll cheat again, but we'll see here. Node app. Cannot find modules. So let's do npm install Mongo.js. Maybe I need it within the. So this is going to install it. So then I just call node app. Okay, so here we are. So here's what my little class does. If you go to so at this, there's nothing. Everything kicks off at the user endpoint because that's what I told it to do. So at the resource 0, which I told it to use user. So this doesn't have anything. But if you go to index, you'll see that here comes this add. Okay. Now I can add. This goes to user add. And as you can see here, it's using the schema that I used, that I provided. So there we go, and I hit save. This returns to me what it entered into Mongo. So now that if I go to index, I see it right here. So this is like the GUI. This is like the GUI for my resource manager, and I can even add another one. So let's add someone else. Chris. Um, blah, and I'm going to save that. So there's Chris, and now I should have 2 people in my index. Yeah, it's ugly crud. I know. I know it is, but I wasn't really interested in the UI. All I was really interested in is if I go to user at this point, what you end up with is the JSON return, like the index of all the people that are in my database. So if you go to user, the index is actually the UI portion. So now what's really cool about this is whenever I do add, I'm actually posting to, you actually look at this, I'm doing a post to user and those elements. So now that I have index, and then we can actually do some other stuff here. So operations, edit, and delete. So edit, I can change this to Travis2. I just save, and that just changed my name. You can see Travis2. I can delete. That takes me to user UID delete. This does a post or a delete command. Well, actually, it does a post with a method type of delete because you can't call delete from HTML. So you kind of have to cheat a little bit here. But what I end up doing, if you did use a delete REST call to this, it will actually work. But what this actually does is a post that deletes it, and so then if you go to index, you'll see that resource is deleted. So what we have here is complete CRUD operations around that object, and all of that within by just deriving from this base resource class. So one thing that you guys can probably see already is that there is no user authentication here. So that's another thing that I was kind of looking into was how do I add some like user auth into all of these operations so that like users could have like logins and stuff. And what I was actually investigating, I didn't really have time to really get into it, but there's something called Passport. Chris, you're going to love this. You probably already know about it. So Passport is really, really cool. You can bring in OAuth, you can bring in local authentication, any type of authentication that you want, you can bring in, and it's actually really, really simple. All I have to do here is, in fact, it doesn't define any endpoints for me. All I have to do is just use this single API to authenticate. Which I think that's awesome because now I can authenticate. Anybody in OAuth just using this single command, using this Passport library. So that's actually what I was going to look into next is how do I authenticate people that want to do certain operations within resource. So I was actually going to bake that in resource. So like if you want to post to this, I'm going to actually call Passport authenticate first, and then only if you authenticate are you going to be allowed to post to that. So some really, really cool stuff that they're still yet to investigate. The whole point is now I believe there's enough libraries out there, there's enough frameworks that you guys can dive into this stuff and have a great time with it because I've been having a blast just getting into Express.js, learning all about how this web application framework works, and also getting a lot of just personal satisfaction out of it because now I have this library. I'm not necessarily going to say it's useful in any way, but I think I really just did it to just to see what it was like to get a package out there. So there's this package, Packages by Travis T. You can click on that. This is what everyone sees now, so they can actually bring in my package. I have a little example on how to use it, which is it's basically you're going to derive classes from this base class, and from those classes you can define your own schemas and stuff for your RESTful endpoints. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much what I have so far. There's going to be a lot of extra cool stuff come. I'm thinking I'm going to further expand on this. There is a little side project that I am working on, and I'm going to try and basically bring the current system up to par with just using Express.js and just see if it's possible to do that. So it's some pretty exciting stuff. Anybody have any questions?
Travis, how do you debug the JavaScript thing on the server side?
Yeah, that is a great question that I wish I could answer. I actually wanted to figure it out before this meeting. I just didn't have time to figure out how to actually hook up a debugger so that I can hit breakpoints within JavaScript.
But it's
Um,
possible.
I believe it is possible to hook up a debugger. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. But that is going to be one of my big objectives because I've got to have a debugger.
Cool.
So, but for the meantime, you can use console log. That's what I've been using.
And
Um,
console log from the server side will still go through.
yep. This
Oh.
right here says console log, and that just gets printed out right here in your
Hmm.
console.
Oh, okay.
So you can still use console. That's actually been my saving grace so far, just to get this something working. Is just trying to use console log to find out what's going on. But that is such an inefficient way to get something operational. So I'm going to be looking into debugging and getting a debugger working on it.
Cool.
Any other questions?
So I have another question.
Yep.
So so Express.js is almost like Silex, sort of,
I would
in a
say
way.
it's a lot like Silex. It really, by itself, it doesn't really do much. What it does is it pulls together a lot of different libraries to present like a framework for developing applications.
Hmm.
Um, the biggest thing that I saw that it brings is it handles all the requests as if it's a web server. I mean, keep in mind, like Node.js was not really designed. I mean, it was designed to handle like web requests, but that was Node.js is more like it's almost kind of like a kernel. It really is kind of like a kernel, and what you do with that is really up to you. If you want to do web apps with it, you would have to write like all of the HTTP server
Hmm.
get this request, and you would have to know exactly what to do with that request. Whereas what Express does is it basically takes the assumption that you want to build web apps. So let's make that easy for you. And so all of the get, set, post, all of those are included as these just app get, app post, and so you can actually do some really really cool stuff with it um, because it abstracts all the other stuff away from you. But
Gotcha.
by itself, I think it's very, very bare bones web application framework stuff.
And then another question is, so I know you mentioned that Node has, the thing about Node is it's able to do concurrency really well, right?
Yep.
So what would an example, like what would you use Node for that you won't use like PHP for or Ruby for?
So okay, so the great example that I was thinking, the side project that I'm working on, which is it's something a server that's going to be serving images. I mean, think about
Hmm.
that. When you request a page that has 50 images on it, that in one single page request is going to be doing 50 different endpoint calls to a single server. To me, that is a massive concurrency issue. You have a ton of different requests mailing the server at once. And so you need an architecture that is able to handle all of those different requests all at the same time in a very responsive way. What PHP does is it spins up these separate, PHP threads for every single request that comes in. Node, it's all running inside a single thread, but it does it in a non-blocking way so that it's able to just spin through requests like nothing. And
Gotcha.
it's really efficient for doing high concurrency stuff.
Gotcha. Cool.
Uh,
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, guys. Thanks. I'm sorry I didn't have all the information with this, but keep in mind, like I'm still new to this, but I'm hooked. I feel like I want this is the thing that I want to become. I want to really get good at this, and so hopefully in the future I'll be able to do another one of these where I get into really a lot of detail on and get really deep into it. But for the most part, this was just kind of skim the surface, get to know Express.js. So I really appreciate you guys listening.
Cool. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Travis.
Bye, guys.